you have the right culture and the right functioning team, that's where you have better KPI measurement techniques, better tracking. You have to be able to measure what you're doing and track yourself. If not, you have no idea where you're going. It's like driving a car without a speedometer, right? Or having a GPS with no direction. So for me, the right functioning organization always has a clear idea of their metrics. They're always measuring their metrics at a reasonable level, and they're always having a clear idea of where the metrics need to go over a period of time.
Hey everyone, Aleks Farseev here. I'm a CEO and co-founder of somin.ai, the platform that makes digital ads 40% more cost efficient and 40% less of the time. But today, we're gonna have a very exciting and in-depth conversation about internal organizational dysfunctions, which is based on a very famous book. This conversation will be held is a truly professional in this area with Mohan Belani, who have built one of the largest Asian tech ecosystems called E27. We're going to discuss many examples. Some of these examples come straight away from our company, so it's going to be a lot of fun here. So I'm very looking forward to it. Hey Mohan, how are you?
Hey Alex, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Nice to meet you. So our company, just let me give you a little bit of background. We are a startup. We've got different departments. We are fully remote.
Mm-hmm.
That is quite common nowadays.
Very common now. Yep.
Thing is that we are really fully remote. It's like some employees we have never met them before. And after 2 years, like, oh hi, nice to meet you first time when we end up catching up somewhere physically. There were some employees that were fired after being hired remote after we worked for 2 years, and we never met them physically in person, or maybe not fired, maybe like looking for a next opportunity or something like this. And then you look in a book and it talks about trust as a basement of everything, right? So it's like you need to have a trust. So trust, in my opinion, is about relationships. It's about people being able to expose vulnerabilities to each other, right? And it's also for you as a leader to become vulnerable truly, so that you get closer to people. To the end, it's all person-to-person work communication. How would I build it through Zoom?
Yeah. So the challenges that you mentioned, right, about remote teams, I've had the exact same challenge. We've been a remote team before the word remote teams or the concept of remote teams was really even popular. We built our entire organization, remotely, because the kind of talent that we were looking for existed in the markets, other markets, and we hired that way, right? So we've had exactly the same problems that you mentioned. I still haven't met a lot of my colleagues, to be honest. Although once a year we try to do a retreat, and that's how we meet them. And so that's something we're bringing back. Now, the concept of trust in the 5 dysfunctions of a team has less to do with trusting one's ability to get the job done, which is typically what most people would think trust is all about, right? The concept of trust is on the basis that whatever I say or do, the way I behave in an organization, is for the betterment of the company, right? And it becomes even more important if it's a negative thing towards another party, right? So if I say something about you, about your work, whether is it good or bad, if you trust me, you know that I'm saying it for the betterment of the company. And that's really what trust is about. So understanding that piece is really critical, right? Because it could work both ways. I could say something about Alex that is really good, and Alex will be thinking, why is he trying to butter me up, right? Does he need something? See, that's where there's no trust. and I could say something bad on the other side,
Yeah,
right?
I prefer to trust you on this. Yeah.
Yeah. Right? Like
Say more.
it could be on the other side,
Yeah.
where if I don't like the work you do, or I don't like certain a way or things were done, you could be like, hey, is this guy? What was this guy's problem? Right? What does he have against me? Right? So understanding that the trust piece is the trust that we have between the different members of the team have got to do with the ability to push the company better, make it stronger, is the first piece. Now, how you actually solve that, right? There are many different ways, right? But the starting point has got to be the leader himself or herself of the team. So that particular individual needs to demonstrate vulnerability. Now, vulnerability, right, means different things, but on most levels, it also fundamentally means like if you don't know something, you've made mistakes. It's about being open, honest, and transparent, right, about those issues. And that has to be led by the leader first before the team members can really, step up to do that, right? It's one of those lead by example scenarios, which I think is very critical. So if a company is looking to implement this framework in your organization, the leader has to be ready to do that first. He can't expect the members of his team to do that if he doesn't do that first. So that's the first part, right? The second part is that trust is also built if there is a certain level of interpersonal relationship between individuals. Now, that makes it even more difficult in a remote environment. That makes it even more difficult if you have not spent enough quality time among individuals. And that's where the 360 concept comes in. So in our organization, we implemented a system where during our retreats, we get every member of the team to map out over the course of their life from 0 to their current age. Say for me, I'm 40, right? So from 0 to 40, to map out on a scale of +10 to -10, every year, how did that year feel like? So maybe when I was 1 or 2, it would naturally be +10 because I had a nice childhood, nothing to be too upset about. Maybe when I was let's say 11 or 12 years old, I didn't do very well in school, so maybe it was a bit lower. Maybe when I was 14 or 15, maybe I lost a big football match in school and that put me down. So mapping these plus and minuses on a scale, and ideally that has to be on a personal level, not necessarily work, is one good way to allow team members to be vulnerable. And when you have that opportunity for someone to present over a 20-minute period the story of their life, right? They could share ups and downs about their families, about their friends, about certain experiences they've been on, some good, some bad, right? About certain things that shape the way they think in life or the way they behave, right? You really have a much deeper sense of empathy for each other. Yeah.
So in a book, they talk about trust as a basement. Yeah, definitely. So and then they go into the conflicts, and conflicts is they are unavoidable. We have conflicts, healthy conflicts, I hope, every day. So did you come across a situations in your company when you get like arrogant but very talented juniors, or very stiff seniors that might negatively impact the organization? How do we solve it?
So the way the framework address conflict is on the basis that if there's no trust in the organization, there will actually be no conflict, because people will not want the conflict.
So it's actually good.
But no conflict is a bad thing.
Yeah,
right?
but like
Yes.
having conflicts is good, right?
So it has to be, there has to be productive conflict, right? So if you think about it, right, if you go to a meeting setting and the teams are discussing and there's no conflict, so when there's an absence of trust, it leads to a fear of conflict. But what typically happens, and that's human nature, right, is that they will walk out of the meeting and they will mingle and conflict between themselves, or they'll comment about things that happened in the meeting. So it leads to an artificial harmony in the meeting environment, but it leads to external like side discussions about the topic, which is very unhealthy. What you want to like enforce or inculcate, right, is a culture where there's productive and healthy conflict within the meeting environment itself. For that to happen, you need to trust each other.
And you can commit later based on that, right?
That will be the later part, right?
Yes.
So before you jump into that, you got to know first that if you don't trust me, right, and if you bring an idea to the table, I will not dare to conflict with you, because I might be afraid of what you think if I try to conflict. But if you and I have the trust built already, based on the first layer, and we know that whatever comments we're making is for the betterment of the company, then if you share an idea and I say, hey, I think this idea has been tried before, it doesn't really work, we might want to approach it differently. You know that Mohan has nothing against me, right? He's actually coming up with this conflict for the betterment of the company. Then that conflict becomes productive. You might maybe, argue back or discuss back, right? But the role of the team leader here is to allow that conflict to naturally occur and not try to stop it. In some teams, leaders are afraid of conflict, as you rightfully mentioned earlier, because they're afraid of what the conflict might lead to, whether it's an unhappiness or further distrust among the team, right? But what the role of the leader here is that he or she should allow the conflict to happen, manage it, but put a closure to it, right? So if we are conflicting about a particular plan, let us conflict, but put a closure of like, okay, so we've conflicted enough, what's the next step? That's where commit comes in, right? But you notice, right, it's a step, right? If we don't have that trust first, we cannot conflict. I might leave the meeting room. In the meeting room, I might agree, oh yeah, great idea, I think this will work, right? I might go out of the meeting room going, you know what, when I have a water cooler break, smoke break, coffee break, whatever, I might go, you know what, the idea is really dumb, it's not going to work, right? And but you won't want to say it during a meeting. So that's where you have a dysfunctional team. So the right organization will need to solve that and work on that issue so that meetings become productive, and meetings also become fun. Because if everybody says yes in a meeting, you have very, very boring meetings, and they end up finishing quite fast.
How would you get people to conflict with you?
So that's
Like
a great question, right?
For example,
yeah.
In Asia, especially in Asia.
The way to facilitate conflict, right, assuming the trust layer is built, right, is to seek for inputs. That's the simplest way. Okay. So the team leader has to very actively seek for inputs. And this has to be across the team, right? Whether it's the junior staff, senior staff, whether it's the staff that knows the subject matter expert or the staff that's new, right? Is to say, hey, John, what do you think of this? Right? Do you have any comments to make about this particular idea or project? So seek out conflict and difference. At some point, right, if you ask enough people, not everybody is going to keep saying yes, 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 right? Sometimes you can ask people, hey, can you try to be devil's advocate and look at it from a different perspective? Where do you think this could go wrong, right? So you are a seeker of differing opinions, seeker of conflicts, and you're hoping that this will allow some level of comfort among team members to voice out the issues. And once the issues get voiced out and the conflict starts happening, it has to be productive conflict, of course, right? But once that conflict happens, then let the team organically work on it. Don't try to resolve it too quickly, but come to closure at some point. And that's where the third one comes in, right? The commit layer.
So to the end, on psychology level, I would assume that this works this way. We've got somebody to share their different opinion, and by telling them, hey, can you be a devil advocate? We kind of removing responsibility from them. So later, they steal their opinion, but at least they have a backdoor to say, as a boss say, ask me. So it's
actually the funny
what I saying. So, but yeah. So
no, the funny term
well,
for this,
fine,
the funny term for this person is the shit stirrer. That's what I like to say, right? So someone has to be the shit stirrer, right? To try and make conflict happen in a productive, healthy way. And it at the start, of course, it might feel unnatural, right? For someone to be creating trouble for the sake of it. But over time, you realize that the goal is to just get people to be uncomfortable. The goal is to get people to be comfortable with disagreeing with certain ideas or plans, and being okay conflicting with other team members in the environment. And to also realize, right, that like harmony all the time is not good in a strong functional team. You want differing opinions. You want people to see things differently. You want ideas to be challenged. You want different perspectives. And that's what you need in a good functioning team.
Actually, it's quite interesting. So that frameworks of 4 types of leaders. Just in the short, they were talking about by Ishak Adizes, right? A nice book. Take a look. I mean, if you haven't seen it, but like what they say is that so 4 types of leaders. The first one is entrepreneur. That's like a visionary, very high level picture. Those people usually piece off the structured, like like a kind of accountant type of person. Those guys, they like everything be planned. Doesn't matter whether the plan is good, as long as it's planned and we're on a plan, then they feel comfortable.
Yeah.
To the end, it's all about what you feel comfortable. Entrepreneur much always generate ideas, and they have a feeling of self-fulfillment. Then there's accounting people. They want to have a plan. Doesn't matter what plan. As long as we have, I follow. It's fine. Then there's a doer type. The doer type is as long as I'm doing something, doesn't matter what, and I can measure it by actually results I can touch. Then it's fine. And then the last one, this is exactly you're talking about, is like a peacemaker. This type of people, they are you can always talk with them in organization. They could be completely inefficient. They could like they might not want to do anything, but everybody loves them because you can go and cry in the shoulder and they will always understand you. Danger of that kind of leader, especially in C-level position, especially ultimate decision makers, is that these folks will be always not making decisions. They will be always
We'll probably never get anything done.
Yeah, let's just like just be friends. We'll figure it out next time. And the worst meetings are those meetings that didn't have any actionable outcomes, next steps, or conclusion.
Yes.
It's like open-ending meetings are the worst meetings because they're just waste of time most of the times.
Yep.
And the biggest jeopardy here is that those meeting endings without a conclusion are the most comfortable for people. It's so comfortable to feel like we did something, but actually we didn't decide anything. But okay, maybe like after 1 week we'll decide something. So I think healthy conflicts are also quite important because they steer the shit, as you say, and then eventually they bring the a couple of is the next step of how to continue solving this problem, or maybe some decisions ideally. And when you have one person who can choose a decision out of a couple of versions that the team came up with, then is ideal, and that's how it should be. Actually, there should be some person who make a final decision, take responsibility.
Yeah.
However, what is interesting in that, like an employee perspective, like level 2, level 3 of organizations, those folks who participate in the meetings, if they feel that the decision has been also made by them through the conflict, through this conversation that they had, then it's a little bit not comfortable not to stick to the decision and not doing it later. That's where commitment comes from, right? If it's a boss say something and I say okay, it's not my baby, this decision. So I could talk near cooler about whether it's the right decision or not at all. Maybe try to avoid executing it, or I don't know. Sometimes people just quit the company, or they do and become this silent quitters. They just contribute bare minimum, especially if they're smart. It's quite easy to get an impression that you're doing something for half a year or for a year. A lot of money waste. But if they were real participants of this decision, then they will be also the one committing to execute it.
So I will slightly disagree with that.
Okay.
Because you can't get everyone to agree on the decision.
Oh yeah.
And in fact, that's not even healthy. In fact, that's the third piece, right? Commitment.
Okay.
So bad leaders are ones that cannot decide. And sometimes you have to make the decision that might be the least favorite among everyone, but is necessary for the company, right? If you need to make the decision to lay off maybe 20% of the company, is the team, other teams going to like you? Hell no, right? But that decision needs to get made, and the right leader will make the right decision. So you can conflict all you want on the second layer, but at some point you have to commit towards making a decision. And the third piece, right, fundamentally is about having less arbitrary outcomes and having a clearer path forward. So once you can trust each other, it allows you to conflict. Once you can conflict, you can lay out all the plans on the table, and then the team can make a decision. And that will lead to commitment. Now, why it's called commitment is because you and I might have a view on a particular plan, right? You might state your points, and if you trust the team, you will very openly conflict and state your points as to why you agree or disagree with the plan. So will I. Once a commitment is made for the plan, we put our egos and issues aside, and we do everything we can to make the plan work. That's what commitment truly means. So that if the plan ends up working well and the company does well, we as a team celebrate the success. But if the plan doesn't work and fails, the people who didn't disagree with it don't come back and say, you see, I told you so that the plan didn't work. No, because everybody has made the commitment to it. Right? The challenge with a plan like that, right, is that whoever who makes the decision to commit has to be okay being wrong. Right? And that's where you need strong leaders to do that.
We want to ensure that there's no people who say, okay, whatever you decide, I don't care. You don't want this kind of things, right? You
absolutely don't want that.
Yeah, so everyone more or less buy it. Somebody buy it because they truly believe. Yeah. Somebody else is buy it because they trust the rest of the team or because they need to some time to cook it or whatever. Yeah. But like everyone committed. So it's not an agreement.
Correct.
But it's not a commitment.
It's a commitment.
Because we as a team, we are going for this part.
The challenge why people can't commit to decisions is because they typically have not had the opportunity to share their views about it first. And you can't share your views if you don't have a healthy conflict environment. This is why step by step it all has to work. So if we have a plan, right, and if you have your opportunity to say your piece on the plan, to contribute to it, it doesn't, okay, of course it doesn't even make sense if you have a team where in theory the decision is already made and the team lead is just sharing it for the show, right? And collecting feedback just for show, but actually at the back of his mind the decision has been made. Then that's not the right way as well. If you do it in a proper legitimate manner, if there's a plan, the plan gets feedback and conflicts from everyone, the plan will naturally get tweaked and improved, right? But once the decision gets made, everybody commits to it. Now, you can truly commit to a decision if you've had the opportunity, right, to share your views, make your point done, everybody has had the chance to listen to it. Sometimes the commit doesn't happen because you feel like your points don't matter. You've not had the chance to conflict with the team, right? If you agree with the decision, then it's less of a problem. But this is usually to cater to those that maybe they don't agree with it, maybe they feel certain things need to change. But the commitment layer is critical, right? And one of the things I do even with my team is that if we make a big decision, I would literally go team my team and say, hey, John, do you commit to this? And John will be like, yep, I commit to it. Ellen, do you commit to this? Mary, do you commit to this? Jane, do you commit to this? One by one. It's one thing for people to say for you to think they commit. It's another thing for everyone to verbalize that commitment to everyone else in the team. It's like a marriage, right? The I do part, right?
Just a couple of minutes ago, I wanted to say that wherever I'm not sure whether everybody who's listening can relate. Maybe on the married yet, but generally speaking, what is the basis of the marriage is a trust, right? Where does all the quarrels come from? All the quarrels come from the thinking that a person is doing something against you with a different intention than it positioned. It's like, you are not happy with this and this, not because you have an adequate reason for that, but because you're just like making troubles for me. Then if you don't have this kind of trust, then couples will end up not talking much.
Yeah.
Which is fear of conflict.
Artificial harmony between the couple.
Yeah. Those couples usually divorce after that, or just live separately or something like that. Right? And then and you're right. It's also quite related to what I liked. What you said is there's not time together, time together is one thing. Like you can have tons of 5 hours meetings. The quality time together, that is what is important. And then you go to commitment, right? You as a family should commit to, I don't know, grow your dog or kids, or I don't know, all those things you buy together. That's all commitment. To the end, you're committing when you are giving your wolves in the beginning.
Yeah.
Thing is that usually that, like many couples, they don't know that they're committing when they give. That's why so much divorce happening.
I mean, that's a great analogy to compare to. Yeah, but again, the big mistake people make when it comes to commitment is that they're like, whatever the decisions make, I'll just go ahead with it. That to me is not commitment. Commitment means that even if you disagree with the decision and the plan, you do anything and everything to make it work. You put your ego aside, you put your issues aside, and you're like, okay, we'll row the boat in the same direction.
Did you come across this kind of people who never help you to to decide together, like make a decision together? They never even give you much opinions. Oh, let's put it differently. They give you lots of opinions. Usually those opinions that this is wrong, and that's wrong. There's no much solutions to all those situations. It's just, I disagree with everything you do. Everything you do is wrong. You go figure out why. Oh, that's because you are the boss. I'm so experienced. I see so many things you are doing wrong. You make you make your company more harmonic for me, Majesty, to work in it.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't sound like productive conflict, right? That sounds very unproductive.
It's like people sometimes, like they source energy from this kind of negativity.
Yeah, it sounds like very toxic people.
It's like I have a power to tell the CEO that I disagree, but the moment I feel that I have the power, that's it. Because everything else is about making changes, executing things, and those things are tough.
Yeah,
I have to work a lot. I'd rather just exercise my power, and after that, I look for the next opportunity. So, like those people are a result of company culture, or those people are just have been built over time in this way. Did you ever come across this kind of people?
Of course, I mean, yeah, definitely in my line of work, I've definitely come across people like that. And I mean, I don't always like to assume that they are like that and they're bad, right? I would always like to understand why, right? And the approach I would take typically is to try and dig further and go, hey, why didn't you share, a few solutions or examples that could make it work? And if they don't, right, I would actually go a bit deeper and say, is there a reason why you're not sharing this? Have you tried this before? Could you share how you tried it before, right? Because if someone knows that something doesn't work, maybe that person has had experience trying it before. So I'll say, okay, how did you try this before? In what environment was it done? Do you think if we tweaked the environment a bit, it would have been better? It could have been a budget constraint. It could be an environment, a market constraint. It could have been a timing constraint as well. Right?
So you come from position of trust as a ground of it again. Like, I'm trust that you have a very good reason to behave this way.
See,
there must be a reason. Can you explain that, right?
So again, right, for the model to work, right, I trust that when whatever he's saying is again for the betterment of the company, and he doesn't have against me. Neither is he exercising his power in a fun, egotistical way, right? If he says, no, I really don't think this is going to work, okay, my logic is like, okay, this guy has the company's best interest at heart. Let me find a way how to make that work. And that's where the leader's job is to be the miner of conflict. If people are not saying why, then mine it, right? Maybe they need some time. Not everybody can come with a clear idea of why something might not work at the meeting itself. Sometimes it might need some time. Sometimes you'll say, okay, tell you what, why don't you spend some time thinking this through, and we come back at another time after you've had a bit more clarity of thought, right? I think to be fair, right, it's also important for the lead to understand how different people think and behave to best bring out the best in them. And I've noticed, like, not everybody can make quick and fast decisions at the meetings itself. Most people are much more comfortable taking some time off to do that. And if that's the case, then leave the decision making to a later time.
Especially
Don't
if they
force
are
the
not,
commitment process.
especially if they are not the ultimate decision makers. I found that CEOs, I found myself thinking that, hey, how come certain things for me so fast, and then for you they are taking so much more time? And I was like, isn't that I just have more experience? Actually, the answer is not that. The answer is much, much simpler. When you are, let's say, the CEO of the company, if you screw somewhere, that's you screw. There's nobody gonna tell you that, hey, you screw. Well, maybe your investors would, but overall, it's just you. But then when there is somebody on top of you on a few levels up, every time you make a decision, that's a lot of responsibilities and different levels on top of you that you need to mentally cross through before you're making this kind of a decision. That's why subordinates, they like team members, low level team members, they actually take much longer time to make decisions.
Well, CEOs need to build a bit more empathy for the work their team members do, right? Because, as a CEO, in your mind, you could think, oh, just do something and it should be straightforward and easy. But on the execution side, there could be many different moving parts that if you are unaware of, and in most cases, if you have a fairly sizable startup, you will not be aware of some of the things on a deeper level, right? So the empathy to realize that, these people it's not that they're slow thinkers, but they have a lot more things to consider is important. The second thing is also the time factor, right? In your mind, you want everything done yesterday as soon as possible. But you have to have the empathy for your own team members and work with them to understand, hey, what's a more realistic timeline to get something done? What I like to do is I like to get my team to set the due dates and come back to me with it, right? And then if it's way too far off from my expectation, we try to find a balance. So I'm going to make the effort to say, okay, why do you need 2 weeks to get this done when I think it can get done in 3 days? And then they will run me through what needs to get done. So in my mind, I either build that empathy and realize, oh yeah, actually you're right. It's definitely going to take a week or 10 days. Or I can say, you know what? Let's skip certain parts of the process, or let's reduce some part of the scope so we can get it done faster. And then we come with a more reasonable expectation on the outcome.
And actually, if we go back to the framework, I've heard it a few times that if you get the team culture, the commitments, their teamwork, which is the first two levels, right? The trust and
Trust and the conflict first.
we kind of don't need all those tracking metrics and tracking instruments that we usually tend to see in organizations deployed like by the books, as like different like task trackers and stuff. Is it actually true that if all these levels are working properly, uh, like KPI people and like strict measurement actually are not necessary?
No, I think it's the total opposite. If you have a right culture and a right functioning team, that's where you have better KPI measurement techniques, better tracking. You have to be able to measure what you're doing and track yourself. If not, you have no idea where you're going. It's like driving a car without a speedometer, right? Or having a GPS with no direction, right? So for me, the right functioning organization always has a clear idea of their metrics. They're always measuring their metrics at a reasonable level, and they're always having a clear idea of where the metrics need to go over a period of time.
Mhm.
And then you use, of course, OKRs and all that to set priorities, but metrics, you don't take away metrics just because you have the right culture, right? The right culture allows you to hit your targets, hit your metrics.
Do we
Right?
do
If you have
stretch
if you have a
metrics?
good discipline as a driver, you will stay within the speed limit, correct? It doesn't mean that just because you're a good driver, you don't need a speedometer.
Isn't it depend on the character of people as well?
Of course. I mean, you don't hire people that have bad characters, right? Ideally. I think there's been a recent case where they termed it as the well-performing asshole. Have you heard of that term?
I've
Yeah.
heard few.
Yeah. So
I've heard few.
I've hired few as well, right? These are people who perform really well, but they're complete assholes in the organization. In the earlier days, when the company was much smaller, I would keep them around.
I even hired a couple of bad performing assholes.
Yeah, that's even worse. I'm very sorry for you, right? But today, if I had a well-performing asshole, I would give the opportunity to the person very quickly to fix that part, or they are out the door, right? And so, you see, company culture, in my view, right, it's about how you do things and making sure that the way things are done is uniform, well-oiled, and efficient. Metrics is about ensuring that where you are today and what you're measuring is correct, and you have a clear pathway of where you need to go. And you're always tracking that. You can never take away metrics in an organization. I think that's very unhealthy.
So how do you marry the metrics and the commitment and the delivery of this?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, right? And that's, I think, the results part is the fourth part of the framework. So once you have the trust built in the organization, you can conflict in a healthy manner, and you can commit to the decisions made, right? Then comes the attention to the results. Say you've committed to hitting a certain KPI, sales metrics, or committing to get a certain code or feature being built by a certain time, right? In a fairly good organization, that target gets hit, the work gets done. Now, what happens when the work doesn't get done, or the person who's in charge of doing the work slacks off, or maybe just doesn't do it for whatever reason? And that's where accountability comes in, right? So a good organization is one that can keep each other accountable. And it's not, at least within the team, right? It's not just the team leader's job for accountability, right? Actually, the results part is the last one. It's the accountability.
No, but
part
also
that's
everybody
first.
committed. If everybody committed, then they would naturally be keeping each other accountable in a sense.
That's very natural and easy to say, right? But sometimes commitments might change. Sometimes people might waver in their commitment. Sometimes they might just lose focus, right? I again, in the right environment, you wouldn't want to straight away assume that person is deliberately doing to sabotage the company, right? But say a salesperson is supposed to hit a certain target that he or she has committed to, and it's not happening, right? There has to, in a good accountable team, there are team members who would keep that salesperson accountable to say, hey, you committed to doing 500k of sales, for example, this quarter. What is happening there, and where's the challenge? Now, assuming that guy shows, he's like, yeah, I've been doing the calls, but our product has not been working, or because of the current environment, the clients are not responding, or what, that's a different matter, right? But accountability is about members of the team keeping each other accountable of what they said they would do, of the commitments that they have made. Because typically in most teams, team members don't keep each other accountable. It's the leader that keeps the team accountable, and that's the problem.
How can my subordinate keep me accountable? I'm a business development person. My boss, head of sales, didn't hit our targets. He's the one closing. I'm the one bringing leads. I feel I get enough leads, but my boss didn't close. Shall I tell, hey boss, what's wrong? What's the challenges? How can I help you?
No, so the way I would frame it, again, this framework is really more for management teams, right?
Yes.
So the part to remember that within the management team, all the team leaders are at the same level.
That's a big organizations overall, generally, right?
I mean, but even within a startup environment, if you have a CEO and a head of product and a head of marketing and maybe a head of BD, right? That management team is still pretty much on the same level, right? But if you think about it, right, my own team members will ask me sometimes why I didn't do certain things or why I didn't make my commitments done. In a healthy, good functioning organization, it is perfectly alright to do that. It could be something simple, right? Like let's say we have our echelon conference coming up, right? In May, right? And I need to be the guy that's posting, let's say, posts on LinkedIn, or I need to be writing an article.
I received the
right?
email from you guys today.
Wonderful, right? So under the hypothetical scenario that if I was supposed to write an article on LinkedIn about it and I didn't do it, my head of marketing should keep me accountable. It's like, hey Mohan, you said this was supposed to get done today. Would they? Oh, of course, in our current environment, yes. Like for example, if I didn't get it done yesterday, which let's assume I was supposed to do, my head of marketing will ask me, hey, this was not done yesterday. Will it get done today? And if it's not get done today, what's the problem? That's accountability, right? And if my creation of the content is part of her marketing plan, and she has marketing commitments and marketing metrics to hit, which is her commitment to the plan, of course you should keep me accountable, right? And that's the right culture.
Did it take you some?
It took us a so.
Yeah, how did you go? Like, how did you reach this?
No, so the framework is not something you read the book, implement today and the next day it gets fixed.
That's what I already learned.
Yeah, it's a constant work in progress, right? And when we used to have an office years ago, we would paste the pyramid on the back of our door when we had our management rooms, the door was closed. I would regularly point to the framework and go, guys, I'm using the trust here, and I'm going to conflict with you on this. So it's a healthy way to remind people of the framework, but to also make sure that they don't feel like I'm put on the spot now. But one thing that I think really helps is a constant reference to the framework, so people always remember it. I do the same thing with our vision, mission. I do the same thing with our core values. And I think if the military uses concepts like this, in sports they use concepts like this. The goal is to do things repeatedly over and over again such that it becomes muscle memory. And I think the pinnacle is when you see in Slack, right, people mentioning the framework or in conversations, right, people mentioning the framework to bring the conversation back to that.
Anybody helping you to do this, like HR? So you just
no, I did all this by myself. Yeah,
it's how much focus it takes, how much time it takes, like how big is part of your overall responsibility as a leader in the company?
I mean, at the initial start, it was of course a large part of the focus I had to make. But at that point in time, it was very much needed. Now, I mean, it's organic to our company culture, right?
Yeah, the rest of the people just pull everyone new into
any new employee that comes in, reading the book is part of onboarding.
Oh.
Yes, this was a simple thing, right? Reading the book is part of onboarding.
That's a hint I can take straight away.
Yeah. So we use a service called PraisePal, which is like a recognition tool. So if you did something well and I wanted to recognize you, I could give you points, and we tie that recognition to our core values, right? And sometimes we tie that recognition to how the framework is being used, right? So if someone was accountable or kept someone accountable, he or she could be rewarded points by other people. So you have to, if you want frameworks and models to work in your company, you have to integrate them as part of your processes and your systems, right? You have to act as a CEO. You have to actively talk about it. You have to celebrate it when it is used well, and you also have to make it a learning point if it's not used well. And I'm very regularly using terms like, hey, I'm keeping you accountable on this, or hey, you are not focusing on the right result on this. Or hey, in the early days when I was, working on my relationship with my co-founder, I used to very regularly tell him that, hey, I hope you trust that this is coming from this is for the betterment of the company.
Quick persona of your co-founder. Right. I'm just quite curious. Like, you seem to be quite naturally focused on the relationships, and it's really important and right. Is your co-founder natural complement and also contradiction to many things that you do? You say you had to remind quite a bit.
No, so it's more of like we are very complementary in our skill sets. Okay. But at the same time, when we were in the early days of implementing the framework, we used it as a way, right, and put it into our conversations to familiarize ourselves and get comfortable with the framework. So like even within management meetings, if I wanted people to conflict, I'll say, okay, guys, let's use the framework now to conflict, right? So it allows people to ease into the culture and the behavior that's expected of them. Right, and it is it is very unwise for the CEO to think that just because a system is implemented, everyone will take it up immediately. It doesn't work that way, right? So you need hacks and ways to get it used by your organization, such that it's
I
not
wish my
overly.
employees are all computers.
Yeah.
I'm an ex-programmer. So, last time I was writing a command and I just executed. Now I'm writing a command, saying a
Yeah.
command, explaining the command 20 times, and not always.
Yeah. Well, that's the challenge in building a company.
Is it because people sometimes looking for their personal goals, but not like the corporate goal? Could it be related to inattention of the corporates?
Yeah. So it you always wish, right, that as you communicate with people in a town hall, everything that you want them to do gets very clearly down to the last man, and it gets done, right? But it doesn't always work that way, because the organization's results, the team's results, and the individual results might not always be aligned. And so after you trust the team, you've conflicted, you've committed to the decisions, and now you're keeping each other accountable to make sure the work is getting done. The last one is the inattention to results. And here's the challenge, right? If I used my own company as an example, my Echelon conference, right? The BD team, the business development team, the programs team, the ones running the events, and the content team are in perpetual conflict with each other. The BD team just wants to keep selling stuff.
Yeah.
Right? If we gave them the entire conference stage, they would get every slot sponsored, which goes into conflict with the content team, because content team is like,
You've
hey,
got a good team,
your sponsors
Some
are
others
going
struggling.
to speak rubbish on the stage and try to sell stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which goes into conflict with the programs team, because programs team is like, when can we confirm the agenda, right? So there will always be conflicts in the results. The team leader's job is to set the result very clear. What is the actual result? What is the outcome? And everybody in the ideal situation should work towards that result. But when an inattention to result happens, it's when an individual or a team puts his or her results above the organization's. And that is bound to happen. You can't expect that not to happen. Revenue people typically will commit this problem most of the time, because there's always revenue pressure. It's very common for my BD guy to go, hey, we have a deal on the table, right? Are you telling me to say no? As a CEO, you're going to be like, how can I lose that deal? You want to make it happen. So the way to manage, there are ways to manage this, of course, right? But the easiest way to manage this, and it sounds very easy on paper but very hard to execute on practice, right, is to make public what the organization's goals are. Okay? And find ways to always reference those goals on a regular basis. So we make our company metrics public to the entire organization, and I use the town hall to emphasize that. But the other thing is also to reward goals, right, in a manner that is not to a particular individual or to a particular team, if that's not a company goal. So under the hypothetical scenario that for our Echelon conference, maybe the goal was to have 10,000 people and a certain CSAT score, right? And from a revenue standpoint, we had a certain target. And if the BD team maybe hit way past that target, right, but it didn't result in the CSAT score and the attendee numbers, don't reward that revenue score. Because you want to make sure that you are focusing on the right result. And that team can celebrate the result on their own, but as a company, we celebrate the results that really matter. So that's the hardest part to do, because by then, you would have a team that trusted each other. You would have a team that already conflicted productively. They can now commit to decisions and have very clear ideas of what decisions have been made, and they can all keep each other accountable, right? And most organizations still struggle with those four pieces. I still struggle with that.
Case study from one of our quite senior employees we had in the company. So when hired, very enthusiastic superstar in his previous job or in her previous job, whatever, and then jump in and do a lot of things, change this, change that, like co-founder style, like eyes are shining and lots of modifications. I was extremely graceful and happy that we got this person in. Then naturally, couple of the demands from that was a salesperson, right? So a couple of demands from the salesperson were not fulfilled on the product side, because building AI platforms that does marketing and sometimes even replace or significantly assist human in digital advertising is not easy, right? It's like a deep tech. Sometimes certain experiments just don't work, or you cannot deploy the features as fast as you want. So you start getting hiccups and misalignment between the sales and the product, or sales and ops. Sometimes you sell something and ops like, what? We cannot do that.
Very common, yeah.
How do you like, hey, sure. I mean, I appreciate you were creative, but I'm going to commit to it. Yeah. And then the product team like, yeah, our sprint moves, blah, blah, blah. And nobody understands what they say, but the result of it, like 2 more months. Yeah. Product teams, technical teams, they speak alien language. The only thing you understand is how much delayed it is in the end. Everything else, supposedly people understand, but actually it's just like some blah, blah, blah. Not for me, a technical founder, but generally speaking, right? So you get this situation, and this initial, again, like parallel to marriage, excitement slowly getting, blurred and diluted in the routines, because you have to execute so many things. So maybe you had a great sales plan, as you just mentioned. Salespeople, one of the most favorite things that they like to say that, product is not as, I don't know, whatever, good, sexy, whatever I was planning for, and therefore maybe I don't get conversion rates, and I don't get enough leads, whatever, whatever, something, right?
Yeah.
So then I can see that the person from, let's plan 500 grand revenues in a quarter or something like that, moves into given current traction, maybe we need to get a conservative or more conservative plan here and there. And then in the next planning stage, when let's say KPI is still not fulfilled, the talk will be, based on my data, everything is not plannable, because operations didn't do this well, and I didn't receive this feature despite I need to, and my projection Excel, I can see that whatever I plan, I cannot commit. I am responsible guy or girl, and since I'm responsible, I'm not going to plan anything, because I can only plan certain things that are going to happen. And how can I, it sounds like a very irresponsible talk, that I'm responsible and therefore I'm not going to be responsible. Yeah. And then this progresses, and the person end up saying, hey, actually, everyone in this world just want money. I want money. I don't care. I can sell anything. I just want more money. If I get more money, I'm happy. If I'm not, then I'm not happy. So you can see like how over years, actually the same person, very bright person, with all the egos and talents and all the bucket of properties, from co-founder spirit transforms into something maybe not that fitting the company any longer. And then there are approaches how to battle. You could, I don't know, change position, refocus the person, let him or her contribute in some other place to do a better job. And actually, I did it a few times with some people, and they become shiny again, and it's great. But generally speaking, what do you do? The founder of Waze, Uri Levine, says, you see somebody is not performing the way you want, think about the rest of the company, fire straight away. In fact, if after 1 month you still don't want to hire the same person as desperately as it was in the beginning, fire. He has a book called Fall in Love with a Problem, Not a Solution. In that book, there is a chapter. Chapter name is called Firing and Hiring. They cannot publish this book for few months because in the US, they were pushing him to rename it to Hiring and Firing. And he insists, no, it has to be Firing and Hiring. Because firing is actually much harder and much more important than hiring. So yeah, is it a solution here? What do we do with this kind of people? Because it's a real problem, a real case, and entrepreneurs are facing it all the time, especially in startups, especially in Zooms.
They always talk about this sexiness around like fire fast and hire slow and all that, right? Like, practically speaking, from a firing standpoint, if you analyze, and when I say firing, I mean like you proper firing, right? Not they resign or whatever. If you typically look at the list of every employee that you've, let's say, fired in the last few years, and you analyze, how long it took you to fire them, you would typically realize that you could have always fired them earlier, and you should have always fired them earlier.
Oh yeah.
Most of the time, you just want to give them a chance. You want to try to make it work, right? Because the truth of the matter is, replacing them is costly and painful. Now, I always feel that if you have to fire someone, it's obviously the mistake of the organization for not being able to get the best out of that individual. So, in order to not make it an emotional process, how I think about it is that there has to be a system around firing. You can't just fire people at a whim because you are having a bad day or are emotional. But you also need to give that individual a chance to work on the problem, right? So and I think most organizations do this. So it's nothing new, right? We will typically have a system where if there's a problem with an employee, and let's say if we have verbal conversations that highlight that, that happens as per normal, right? But if the problem is to a level where you want to make them note that the conversation that you're having is an important one, and if it doesn't improve, it leads to something more serious, then you give them a verbal warning first. That is typically the start of a process that typically I would say will happen over a 2-month period. The day you give a verbal warning, within a 2-month period, you have to have clarity whether this employee can be kept or not. And the verbal warning, if you notice, right, is not that bad yet. It's just a verbal warning, right? But you also have to be clear, right, that the moment you hit the verbal warning, there will be a fracture to the relationship on some level. The organization needs to be clear that does this lead to something worse, which is a written warning, or does this lead to nothing at all?
Could that lead to something better?
Of course, right? From verbal warning, that individual could, realize the problem and say, hey, okay, I realize this is a problem and I'll work on it. And we've done that many times and it has worked out tremendously well.
If people want to, if people want to leave, do you want to convince them to stay, or it's almost always?
It depends. It depends on why, right? Like, I mean, if people are just leaving because, they feel like it's not an environment that has worked for them, then I would respect that, right? But for people to leave just based on a verbal warning, I think verbal warnings need to be positioned in a way where it's a formal feedback session. It's very different. Okay, verbal warning sounds quite drastic. Like, hey, I'm verbally warning you that you messed up, so don't mess up again, or I'll send you a written one. No, it's more like, hey, look, okay, there are certain things that are not working well.
In Indonesia, you have to do it 3 times.
Yeah, so I was actually going to suggest the 3 times concept as well. But when I talk about what it essentially means is that it's a structured feedback session. Okay. It's not a, hey, this was not done too well. Try. It's a really structured feedback session where you have to sit down and say, hey, look, this is not going too well. There were certain things that you made that really are not comfortable from an organization standpoint. So I need to verbally let you know that this is an issue now, right? Here are the things that are a problem, and here's what needs to be worked on or improved or what. And I think good employees genuinely appreciate that because they really want to know where they have messed up or where they can improve or how they can make a better impact.
Especially if you build on those layers, right? Which is the one we discussed.
If you have the trust layer there, if you're already conflicting naturally, this becomes a very natural thing.
They will treat it as opportunity.
They will genuinely appreciate it. And they will want to work on. Good people will always want to work on where they are weak at.
You're telling me this. You really like me, really want me to stay. You're helping me actually.
And if they see it in the right way, they'll realize that the organization cares about them and wants them to be better. Right? So we'll start with that, right? And if that doesn't get worked on, it becomes a written warning number 1. Right? Typically, when there's a written warning, you want to go it on record. It's not a Slack message anymore, right? You want to be on record on email to make it really fair and clear to the employee that there are problems, we need to work on it, and it's not just a written warning, right? There has to be a plan, right? Some people call it this PEP plan or some improvement plan thing, there has to be a clear plan over a 4-week period. And every week there has to be a proper check-in between the manager and the individual to make sure that he or she is nudged in the right direction. So that's why I say it's a 2-month process. From a verbal to a written, right? If it doesn't get fixed within a month, then it goes from a written to a firing. And that's another 4 weeks typically.
And I think like all the advice that you give, they all have one very important backbone mindset that I would just probably also want to mention as a thing that I learned. Like the relationship between organization, the CEO, and the people that work with you, and also like a true intention, right? It shouldn't be a selfish intention. In a sense, your employees, they're kind of your internal, I don't know, customers. They like, how to say, me as a CEO should genuinely look for bring value to my employees through the company by letting them work in, learn in, grow professionally, and as individuals in all ways.
There's one thing I tell my employees, right, during the town hall, and I mean that very seriously. And I tell everyone, right, look, the town hall process is an opportunity for you to understand what the next 13 weeks of your life is going to look like in the organization. And it's also the one opportunity you have to shape, to question, and to really ask yourself, what are you doing for the next 13 weeks of your life, right? So it's a two-way thing, right? On one level, organizations need to realize that, individuals need to realize that they are in an organization to learn, to grow as individuals, yes, to make money as well, and to contribute and help us reach our goals and missions. But they also have a say in doing that. And if they don't voice out that say, you need an organization that trusts each other, right, for that to happen. But if they don't voice out that say, if they don't question what the organization is doing to shape it, then the onus is also on them if things fail, right? Then the second part is that on my end, I genuinely take feedback from individuals very seriously on what we're doing, whether is it right or wrong. More so when it's wrong, right? I need to know, hey, what are we doing badly? How can we fix it? And can we put the right resources behind it to make it happen? And if there are individuals that go like, I think this is not done right, I would love to fix it, I'm like, yes, I will give you whatever it needs to make it happen.
Because to the end, our businesses are not charities. We it's our responsibility as a CEOs to make them profitable, grow to the end, to, like in your case, to enlighten more businesses around, to create an opportunity for your customers, visitors of the conference, and the businesses to expose the information, to let them connect, and in my case, to make marketers to do a much better job and don't feel too bad in their job. But also internally, like we're talking about internal things, we shouldn't be selfish about what we do. We shouldn't look for business growth, because at least half, or maybe more than half, of our mission, in my opinion, is make sure that people who work with us, both in other organizations and also in our organizations, are the ones who actually entrust their well-being time, the only one life that they have, to collaborate with us. And it's our responsibility to do all our best to make sure that they flourish.
Yeah, you're spot on.
For partners, whatever we can to do, maybe sometimes sacrificing some of our individual needs, just to let them become better partners, better clients, better businesses, for employees to become better professionals. That's why sometimes actually you should let people go, because we shouldn't think that our organization is the ultimate life's goal. Our organization, most of the times, in one of the maybe a very big steps, but yet steps in their life ladder, bringing them to somewhere very bad, and ultimately happiness in their families, in their lives, and a big value to them and to other businesses that they will serve in the future, which is much bigger goal and much bigger vision behind whatever we do. So we're gifted. We have a great gift to impact the world at much bigger scale as compared to those who just employ it, and we shouldn't use it for our selfish desires. We should really contribute. I think whatever practices that you shared, even the three notices, the verbal, oral, and the written notices, is not about to covering the butt. Is to help people to be better, and I think that's what matters the most.
Yeah,
it's very exciting.
No, I mean,
conversation.
Yeah, it's a. I mean, I myself have learned everything through making so many mistakes, right? So that's the only way to get better, I feel. So to continue to make mistakes and to build on them and refine
and just
them.
don't repeat them too often.
Just don't repeat them. Correct. I completely agree.
Really nice catching up. I learned so many things today as well. A couple of things I'll just go and play straight away. For example, reading the book before as a part of onboarding process.
Yeah, I mean that's I think that's really important. So people at least people get like how your organization functions, and then putting in a mechanism that allows you to talk about it all the time. It's very, very important.
Will do. Very nice meeting you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mohan.